Should have been weary about my bladder.
Thank you for tuning in to Matters of the Heart Radio Live with your host, biblical counselor and author, Ms. Wendy. You can chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in your player to send us a message. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Hello and welcome to Matters of the Heart Radio Show with me, your host, Wendy Torres. It's a delight to have the opportunity to spend some time with you today. Time is a precious commodity, and that's something that I'm going to be talking about on the show today. For those of you who have a senior in your life and you are looking at what life will look like without them as they begin to embark on their mission in life, or whether it's high school going into college or they're leaving college and going on into their career of choice. And some of you precious parents out there have a baby that's going to kindergarten for the first time. Oh, I've experienced all of it except one graduating from college, but that's in the works. I'm about to send my second one to college now. And it's kind of a bittersweet feeling. You know, there's so much excitement and so much joy that comes. Yeah, I think it can create an element of concern because of the unknown. So you begin to wonder, did I teach them everything they need to know in order to make it? Will they make good choices? Will they make right decisions? Whether it's because they're going to kindergarten and you're wondering if they're not going to bite, or if they're going to raise their hand if someone's hurting them, or they need to go to the bathroom because they're shy, or if it's a senior and you're thinking, I hope that you know how to get all of your clothes washed and make yourself something to eat and be able to manage the pressure of what's happening around you. Regardless of which form of transition you're going through in life, today's show is about you, and it's about me, as I have a daughter graduating from high school this year. And some of you will find that this is applicable if you have a life change going on where maybe your parents are aging and they're moving in with you, or you're moving in with them, or if you've taken care of someone, a loved one, and they have passed on or are no longer in need of your assistance. It's about change. Change truly is inevitable. We're consistently growing. Times are changing. You can see it in the media. You can see it on the news all of the time, but you can see it in just the typical devices that you may have around your home. Yesterday for lunch, I was out with two of my children, and one of the things we were talking about was typewriters. My youngest is 12, and he has never seen a typewriter in his life. I don't even think that my 17-year-old that was there had ever seen a typewriter either, but they do know what it's like to tap a screen with your thumbs and be able to accomplish whatever you need, including a paper for an English class. And we chuckled and we laughed as we sat at the table and when we talked, because my daughter then, not the one graduating, but she's a junior, she'll be a senior next year, Lydia was telling me that she needed to get home and write a paper. And I began to ask her what it was about, and just carrying on that type of conversation with her. And she said, well, I'll look the information up on the internet. And I just started chuckling, and I said, I tell you, Lydia, times have changed so much. When I had to write a paper, I went to something called a library, and I opened something called a card catalog to search what I was looking for. And then I would walk around the library gathering and collecting books that I needed. And I did not copy and paste anything from one screen to the next so that I could put my notes together. No, I sat there with the book wide open, a piece of paper or a spiral in front of me and a pencil or pen, and carefully wrote down what I needed to know from that book. So as you can see, if you can relate in any way, you know that technology has changed very much so, and we don't even need to wait to send or receive a letter. We have this thing called email. And so I can communicate with someone on the other side of the world, which is I did, as a matter of fact, recently as I was traveling to Europe and I needed to make arrangements. It was simple. I didn't have to waste any money on a international call as I would have had to do many years ago. No, I simply wrote an email and everything was settled. And when I needed to call and speak with someone, there was a fabulous app that they had there and that I have here, and they suggested that I call them on it, and I did, and it didn't cost me a dime. But I can only imagine that my grandmother would have just, coming from a different country, just been surprised because the rates to call internationally were so expensive. Well, that's not what I'm talking about, but it just highlights how much times change and how we must adapt to change. We must be willing to embrace it, because the more that we fight it, the harder it is to overcome the challenges that we perceive in it. Well, joining me here, I have Christine, who helps produce the show and keep me on track, and she dialogues with me from time to time. So, Christine, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
So, Christine, you hear me talking about change and how it's inevitable and technology, and you're really the tech-savvy person. You know it is not me, which is why I depend and rely and lean on you. But technology has changed so much, and times have changed, and it's important that we keep up with the change. But our children change. I know you're not a mom, but you've been very close to my children for years now, and you've seen them change and grow. What comes to your mind as you hear me opening up the show today?
Excuse me. I think what comes to mind to me is to take stock of the being in the present, like we talked about last week, because there is so much change that's happening, and you can, I think, marvel in the moment of the change, and oh wow, my kids are going to college. Oh wow, I'm going to be less burdened with having to provide for them because they're going to be in the dorm. Or oh wow, they're getting to experience this part of life. Or oh wow, my last child is now in kindergarten. It's going to change my life dramatically. And I think when we marvel so much in the change, I think maybe it can prevent somebody from being mindful of what exactly is changing. Your child is now no longer as dependent on you because they're not in kindergarten or they're not at home anymore, or just perhaps what they're going through, or the child that's going off to college. Are they fortified enough in their faith to take care of themselves when they're out at college? And how do I make sure that that's possible? And I think that there's sometimes a lot of change that happens that maybe prevents you from maybe just taking stock of the moment is kind of what I think about. So while to me change is amazing, just like with technology, change is amazing. Just 10 years ago even, we didn't have the opportunity to talk to people on our cell phones the way that we have before.
Sure, the price was outrageous. They would charge you by the minute, and it was expensive. We only used them really in case of emergency, or if we had some really lofty or great position in our career where the company paid for the bill.
Well, and even in that, when we talk about emails or text messages, what we're losing in that too. So I think it's just you that intimacy of writing a handwritten letter, or that intimacy of even a phone call instead of a text message. So I think it's always, to me, when change happens, you can marvel in the change too, but kind of to take stock of what's going on in that change to make sure that your heart and your kid's heart, or whoever you're dealing with, or your parents, or whatever's going on, that change, just to take stock and be mindful in that moment is important to me, I think.
Yes, I think it's important to be mindful, but I think it's even more important to look for the good. So many times we can suffer and we can become very depressed and anxious because all we can really all that we choose to focus on, because I do believe that it's a choice. You may have to exercise a lot of strength to cast down thoughts that are negative, but it is a choice to remain in a negative mindset or attitude. But if we will look for the good and focus on the good, I think it helps us in that transition. Whether it's going from being married to divorced or single to married, there is so much that you have to look forward to. If it's a child leaving home and moving out, there is still so much to look forward to. It is really just the beginning. It is not the end. It is the beginning of you getting to see them soar and to apply the things that you have taught them. The school year is almost over, and if there are things, I'm going to say this for parents who have graduating seniors, if there are things that you have in your heart and in your mind that you think, I just don't know that they're grounded well enough in this, then why don't you book a weekend? Why don't you plan a day or two? Even if it means, and I hope the educators do not get mad at me, but I think hope they understand my heart behind the next comment, even if it means you keep them out of school for a day or two. If time is borrowed and the plane ticket is purchased and they're going away, take the time to invest in them. And maybe even write down those things that you really want them to take with them. You really want them to remember, or to have it to reference back and to reference back to and to look at as they're gone and away from you. Because we know that there are times, I can think of whenever I was living in a dorm, there are times when you really wish you could have that comfort, but you really don't want to ask. You want to feel grown up and like you can handle it, but it doesn't mean you don't want the comfort and the love of home. It's great to write notes, great to write letters, and great to write down things you want them to take with them and to remember. And by all means, if you've not taught them how to wash their clothes, go ahead and teach them how to wash their clothes and dry them. If they do not know how to make simple things for themselves to eat, let's make a day of cooking and writing. They can write things down themselves so they know how to make it, at least a few staples, so that they are not consistently eating noodles or something out of a can. They could have something relatively healthy, and they're not spending all of their money at the nearest fast food place. It is such a blessing and such a privilege to be a parent. Some of you, I know, are struggling and you're thinking, my baby has grown up. Where did these past 5 years go? And now they're off to school. This is it. This is my last summer with them. And you may begin some of that mourning even now, though the time is not approached, because you've already had to register them in kindergarten. You know, it is going to be such a wonderful time, such a wonderful summer, if you will allow it to be, by being intentional in how you focus your energy and how you focus your time. And for those of you who are beginning to wonder, what am I going to do with myself? Maybe I will have an empty nest now. You know, there's no better time to begin to pursue those interests that you've always had, but because you have been sacrificial in your love and shown up to football games and cheerleading competitions and volleyball, softball, baseball, name it, I get it. Because you've spent so much of your life dedicated to them and supporting them, perhaps there wasn't quite the same opportunity to invest in yourself, and now is the time. Go ahead and enroll before they graduate. Set the date for soon after they graduate, and allow yourself the opportunity to pursue other possibilities, other interests, maybe even a vacation. I'm very much in agreement of this. I love this idea. Take a vacation without your kids. It is good for you and it is good for them. It's good for them to see that you're strong and you can have a good time. And it's good for them to see your ability to take on adventure and challenge, especially if you're traveling abroad. And it gives them a great example, I believe, in pursuing their own dreams. And I love it. I can't say enough about that. Well, let's take a quick commercial break, and then we will come back, Christine, and talk some about embracing that new season of change, whether it's through divorce or someone graduating, and being able to positively reflect on what the future holds.
Are you suffering from a past hurt? Lingering pains can inhibit your potential to be all that God has in store for you in your life. As a biblical counselor, Miss Wendy has written Healing Waters, a 21-day workbook which offers well-thought-out steps to emotional recovery. Making use of hands-on activities, prayers, and meditation on Scripture, Miss Wendy helps build faith and develop patterns that establish lifelong vitality. Why not take that step to the healthy, whole, God-filled individual you're meant to be? Go to mattersoftheheartradio.org to order your copy today. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org. You're listening to Matters of the Heart Radio with your host, Miss Wendy. We'd love to hear from you today. You can chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in the player located on mattersoftheheartradio.org, or you can also reach out to us on our Facebook page at Matters of the Heart Radio. Now, here's your host, Miss Wendy.
Hello, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Matters of the Heart Radio show with me, your host. I do hope that you join me at mattersoftheheartradio.org. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org, and let me know what matters are on your heart, because what matters to your heart matters to God's, and it certainly matters to mine. Well, we're talking today about embracing change. In particular, when you have a child graduating or going into kindergarten, whether they're graduating high school or college or going into kindergarten. And we are also talking about the season of change when maybe your living environment changes, maybe your social status changes, maybe you're going from single to married or married to single. We're talking about change, period, in these regards. And before the commercial break, I was talking about pursuing interests that you may have. And that may seem like a foreign concept to so many, especially women, because as women and as moms, we can get so involved in our children's lives that we really can lose sight of who we are as individuals. And our whole world is consumed with softball practice and washing uniforms and getting school supplies, Christmas plays, Valentine's parties, homecoming, prom. We can get caught up in so many of the activities our children have that when it becomes time to focus on ourselves, we can tend to feel lost. We don't know what it's like to love ourselves. We don't know what it's like to pursue our own interest because it's something we have not done for such a long, long time. So if you're listening and you're wondering, well, Wendy, how do I do that? How do I find a new hobby? How do I know what I will like now? I'm not really sure who I am. The first thing I'll say is that that's very common. I see it in my office all the time as a counselor when women tend to go through some type of change and they're needing to tap into who they are or really solidify their identity. So I want to encourage you to try this. I'd like for you to do something called simple pleasures. I would like for you to, and if you're a husband, encourage your wife or your sweetheart to do these things. I'd like for you to begin to do one thing for yourself every day that you enjoy that is perhaps frivolous. It has no meaning. It has no sense of importance, but it does minister to your heart. It is something that you enjoy. It is something that you would like to do, whether it is going for a walk in the rain, taking an extra long bath, buying yourself a shake at the local store. It doesn't have to be important. It doesn't have to be grand, but you begin to pay attention to yourself and things that you would like to have, where you may have typically referred to your husband or your children and maybe what they wanted to eat for dinner, what they would like to have for a snack, or what needs they have. It's a great way to begin to transition into thinking about yourself by doing those simple things, choosing what you would like to eat for dinner, aside from macaroni and cheese and chicken strips or pizza, something like that. It could also be picking up a daily walk. I love walking, I love running, and I think it's a great way to begin getting your body moving and really connecting with, connecting with God through the fresh air and listening to the birds singing or smelling fresh cut grass. Doing things like this once a day will be, and asking yourself, what can I do for myself today? What would I like to do today? You know, something I've done that I enjoy as well is even taking a walk in the rain. I will put on something to where I come out relatively dry afterward, and I will take off and just enjoy it. Does it make sense? No, I'm not doing it when it's freezing cold either, but it's something that I enjoy, and I've learned to ask myself, what would I like to do today? I would like to take a walk in the rain because I really love rain. That may seem simple or silly, but we all have our natural bent and personality and things that we would enjoy. Some of us need to learn how to go to a restaurant and enjoy a dinner alone or a lunch alone, and perhaps read a book or just enjoy watching those that are around. Others, it may be a big stretch to look at what's playing at your local theater and go watch a movie simply because you want to watch the movie. All of these things are great ways to begin to focus on yourself, to begin to create for yourself your own identity. You do not have to have someone right there in order to enjoy it, but you do need to learn to enjoy yourself. And I can't say enough about reading books and listening to shows such as Matters of the Heart that help enrich you, that help you become the best you that you can be, if that makes sense, that help you to strengthen your inner man, to encourage who you are, to spur on creative ideas, to be a breath of fresh air. It's one of the things I've enjoyed over the years. So, Christine, focusing on yourself, does that sound like a hard thing or not?
Well, being a single person, I've never had a problem focusing
yes,
on myself.
I was not going to quite say that, but I did want to hear what you had to say.
You're cute.
But I love that you do that, because you can do that. You'll say, hey, the new Star Wars movie's coming out, so I'm going to go do this. Or I feel like, but it's very different. I like it. I think it's great because there are so many people out there, and particularly women, because they feel like they have to have someone right there with them to keep them company, who are afraid. They're afraid of how they're going to look or something like that, and they don't take the chance and go out there and do it.
Okay, well, first of all, I got called out for being single, and then I got called out for being a Star Wars nerd. So.
I didn't say you were a Star Wars nerd, and you said you were single.
Yes, I am both, so, anytime. I'll discuss it any place, anytime, but that's another show. I think that it's, for me, I think the idea, especially in seeing the many transitions, I'm calling you out now, seeing the many transitions that you've gone through in your life, from being a stay-at-home mom to being a career woman to being a single mom to being a mom that's transitioning her children through the different stages of life, and to see you develop a really healthy self-care. I think is really, I can't underscore the importance of that enough, because to me it's vital in your mental well-being. And it sounds silly and it sounds trivial to say, well, go see a movie or read a book. It may sound really trivial, but I've seen it just be so vital, because it helps you discover yourself, and it helps you discover things that help make you more, just gives you vitality, and it expands your whole horizon about just everything. And I think it gives you a sense of life too. And I think in all of that, for me as well, seeing people that go through transitions and changes, I'm especially thinking of a dear friend of mine who just lost her second parent, her mother, and in that, and the faith that she's grounded in, thank God for that too, because I think in that, she says, I'm sad to be losing my mother, but at the same time, I know she's in heaven with my father. I know my father will greet her, and all that. And I think even if you're not going through something as dramatic as that, to make those transitional changes in your life, and for women who maybe are married and going into single, or single going into married, where you get to share your faith, or just seeing those opportunities or incorporating that in a stronger way. You're not sitting in the back now with the baby that's crying. You've got kids that will sit through the service on some level. It's an opportunity as well, not just to feed yourself and to feed what you love, the things that you love and you can enjoy doing now, but a way too, I think, of increasing your spiritual life. And I think in those moments too, it's vital to turn to God and say, like, what do you want?
Absolutely.
To me, I mean, Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely. And the Lord has given us a life, and He wants us to enjoy our life. Our life and the very breath in our lungs is an absolute gift from Him. And if you'll think about the parable of the talents, He took great delight in the ones who capitalized on what He had given them, who made good use of it and didn't squander it away. I cannot emphasize enough that it's important that you learn to like yourself and like who you are as a person, what you do, what you stand for. And if there are things that you do not like, it's okay to begin to implement that change now. As you're looking at changes in life, it's okay to begin to implement that change in your life that says, I've always wanted to be whatever it may be, more generous. So go ahead. You don't need to buy so many groceries now at the grocery store. So go ahead and give to the orphanage down the street, or join a missions project. You don't need to be home every day, or teach that class at church, volunteer at your nearest pregnancy center, whatever it may be. Add to the quality of your life. And whatever you're longing to do or change within yourself that you may not care for, go ahead, go for it, do it. There's absolutely no reason not to do it. God has given us a life to enjoy. Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it to the full, abundantly. And He wants us to enjoy that very much. Remember that your children can connect with you even though they're gone. If they're gone, remember that there is this wonderful thing called a telephone. They all have one connected to them, it seems like, and you can text them or call them. You can encourage them with scripture. You can ask for a picture or Skype them. You can Facebook them. You can send Snapchats. I mean, the opportunities to connect are plenty. Go ahead, connect, catch up with what some of those local things are that they're doing, and wish them well. Encourage them so they don't have the weight of bearing your sorrow, but you can do this. God will be faithful to see you through this element of change. He will not forsake you. He will not leave you. And you have so much to look forward to in the new season of life. And if you cannot see it, ask friends that you trust. And in your prayer time, ask the Lord, can you help me to see what I have to look forward to? Because I feel a little blinded by the sense of losing my child as they graduate, or as they go off to school, or my parents are leaving, whatever it may be. There is good in your life, and your story's not over, and we know that your story's not over because you're still breathing. Now, we're going to go ahead and take another break and come back, and we're going to talk about hope and the importance of having hope in the midst of difficult times.
Matters of the Heart radio show is a part of the only Christian radio station in Pakistan. Miss Wendy has the opportunity to share the gospel message there, and you have the opportunity to help. For a donation of any amount, you can help her to continue to bring this ministry to the people of Pakistan. For a donation of only $6, they will receive a Bible in their own native language of Urdu. Simply go to mattersoftheheartradio.org and click on the donate button today. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org. You're listening to Matters of the Heart Radio with your host, Miss Wendy. We'd love to hear from you today. You can chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in the player located on mattersoftheheartradio.org, or you can also reach out to us on our Facebook page at Matters of the Heart Radio. Now, here's your host, Miss Wendy.
Well, you're listening to Matters of the Heart radio show, and I'm your host, Wendy Torres. It's a delight to spend time with you talking about the changes of life. And when things do not exactly go the way that we planned, oftentimes we have an idea for how we think things are going to go, but it doesn't always turn out the way that we planned. And what I'm talking about is not a plan for tomorrow, although that can change. But sometimes it's a plan for our family life, who our children will turn out to be, who our husband or wife will turn out to be, what married life will be like, what single life will be like. And it's important that we adjust to change, that we welcome change, and we understand that God is the God that changeth not, but that He sees us through every element of change. He is our He is our rock. He is the one that we can count on. He is the one that we can depend on day in, day out to remain consistent and to join us in every adversity, every trial, every test, every joy, every laughter that we experience. Well,
I'm not a proponent of change. This is why I give you the ugly face.
Because... Oh, I've been wondering why you're looking at me that way, and it's hard. I know it's hard.
I don't like change. Well, I think too, for me in change, I think it's the worst possible scenario because I'm here, I'm comfortable where I am. Obviously, God is blessing me because I'm in a good place, and now you're asking me to change. What in the world? Why would I be going to something so different, especially when the prospect looks none too good for the future? And that, to me, is constantly just, I don't like change.
Or when you have questions, I can think of a change. I can think of going through change in my life, and I'm thinking, I do not know. I don't see how this looks good. I don't see how I'm really going to enjoy life this way. I think the very best counsel is in not worrying and truly, truly, truly connecting with Jesus every day. Because when our hope is in Him and not in people, not in life circumstances, not in the location where we live. It's so much about putting things on the altar. Change is so much about putting people that we love or places to live. I'm thinking about when you moved here, times that I've had to move. It's about putting it all on the altar and really, really, really trusting Him with our times. I think it's in times of change that we can come into the crisis of, how much do I really trust you, and how much do I really know you, God? I thought I did, but now that this looks shaky, I'm not so sure. Now, sometimes it may be that we really need to spend more time in prayer about a particular something, but other times it's just that we're resisting, and for no good reason other than we just don't like change. But there's a time and there's a place. Ecclesiastes tells us that to everything and to every season there is a purpose, a time for everything under heaven. For some of us, that's having children at home and not having children at home, being single or being married. There are so many different changes that we can go through in life, having healthy parents and having aging parents. There's a time and a season for everything. But oh, are we ever wise? Oh, are we ever prudent when we learn to be in the present? We just spoke about this not too long ago, Christine. Learning to be in the present. Someone is in your company, you have the opportunity to love them right then, right there. You're able to say, I love you. I care for you. What can I do for you? Because all time is borrowed.
And I think it reminds me to go back to what we were talking about a little bit before the show is when you make that change initially, and since I do not handle change well, it's always very, very difficult for me to see where that good is coming. What good fruit is going to come out of this? What good fruit is going to come out of moving like I just did or whatever. And like we had talked about before the show, the story of Joseph, where then he was sold into slavery, and man, that's not a good situation to be looking at. And just I think too, the thought that I have in that is that maybe that fruit isn't gonna be born tomorrow. It may not be born in a week, but God wills your good. God wills the good for those who love Him, and I think
He works all things together for good to those that love Him. Sure.
Yeah, and I think that to me, I think there's going to be good that comes out of this. Mm-hmm. It may not look that great now, but
sure. And His plans are to prosper us. They're not for evil. They're not for harm. They are to prosper us. Jeremiah 29:11. I'm glad you were quoting from Romans chapter 8. It is true. He is always working for us, though sometimes we cannot perceive how something difficult can be in our good or in our best interest, because there can be some very difficult things that come. I have something very difficult that I have to do after this show is over. We may not perceive how it can be good. It may not be great at the moment, but somehow, some way, God does indeed work everything out for our good, whether it's something that we learn, new people that we meet, a way that we get relocated. He is always working in our midst. I think oftentimes it's really more on us and our ability to praise Him anyway, to thank Him despite the uncomfortable situation, to trust Him in the dark when we only faintly hear a whisper in the direction in which we should take. And oftentimes it can leave us with a sense of hopelessness. And hopelessness is dangerous. And I want to focus on that for the rest of this show. Being hopeless is dangerous because hopelessness is really the opposite of being joyful. And the joy of the Lord is our strength. With hopelessness comes weakness, comes a serious vulnerability in which the enemy loves to take advantage of. And it is imperative that when we get to that hopeless state, I know sometimes we can have a day where we just want to stay in bed and it doesn't really appeal to us to get up, get dressed, and sometimes those periods can last for a while. My friend, there are good counselors in your area, and if not, there are good resources that you can get a hold of by ordering them online. I'd love for you to get a copy of my book, Healing Waters, if this is you. It's a 21-day healing journey, and it's a workbook that I take you step by step through a healing process using the Word of God and implementing tools to help you overcome life's challenges and sorrows. You do not have to remain hopeless or helpless. There is hope because Christ is alive. And today, the show is being sent to you because He knows how much you're hurting. And He wants you to yet hope again. The Word tells us that against all hope, Abraham hoped. Against all hope, he hoped. He was old. There was no way. It made no sense whatsoever to think that at his age and at Sarah's age, living in such a, I'm trying to figure out a really kind way to say this, to living at the age that they were at. Help me out here.
She was elderly. She was past childbearing age. That's biology of life.
Exactly. So I believe that she was 90. And at that point, against all hope, how many 90-year-olds do you know? I know a few, and I cannot imagine them being vibrant and healthy. It's hard to imagine being healthy at 40-something now. I'm much less thinking about being pregnant at 90. But against all hope, Abraham hoped. And I have to think, and sure enough, the promises of God came to pass. And I have to think that Joseph was the same. If you're familiar with Joseph in the Bible, he was the son of Jacob, and against all hope, he hoped. He went through terrible, terrible, terrible tragedies. He was favored by his father. Well, that's great, except that his brothers were jealous of him. That's not great. So jealous, in fact, that they trapped him and threw him in a pit and were going to leave him there for dead. Fortunately, one of his brothers decided, no, we probably shouldn't do this. Thank God for the older child, who has some sense of reason about them. But instead of letting him out and letting him return home, they sell him as a slave. How awful is that? Your own flesh and blood selling you as a slave. That had to be so hurtful to Joseph, because up until this point, all he had known was love and acceptance, an element of security. But there he goes, off to be a slave. I love it that though difficult things came to Joseph, the faithfulness of God came too. So though that happened, he ended up getting to work in Potiphar's house. How many people get to go from being sold as a slave to working for the wealthiest, most influential person in an area? Not many. That's the favor of God for you. Then there was Joseph being trapped and ensnared by Potiphar's wife, and he refused to do what was wrong. He was thrown into prison. That is not good. Who wants to be thrown into prison for doing what is right? Not doing what's wrong, doing what's right. None of us would volunteer for that. But yet you see the faithfulness of God again, because he was given favor with the person in charge, the guard there in charge, and then the guard put him in charge of the other prisoners. That is the favor of God. More hope comes in. Devastating news, and then the favor and the hope of God. Devastating news, and then the favor and the hope of God. So he then interprets a dream for a butler and a cupbearer, and he tells them, don't forget me. He's there in prison. Don't forget me. And you know what they did? They forgot him. Fortunately, later, then they did remember him. And he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, Potiphar's dream, and Pharaoh's dream, and was then given command over all of the land. We see difficult times and prosperous times. The difficult times will not last forever. Have you ever heard the phrase, this too shall pass? We can look at God's word and see a prime, wonderful example here, even in the life of Joseph. This difficult time too will pass, and the favor of God is for a lifetime. It is for a lifetime, and he endured those difficult times against all odds. There had to be an element of hope that he nurtured there. Otherwise, why would he have even asked the cupbearer and the butler to remember him unless he had hope that he would get out?
I think one of the things that just keeps calling back to mind over and over again is for me is the idea of instant gratification. And the thing is that when Joseph was sold off to slavery as a child, and I think it says something like 15 to 20 years it was that had passed. I mean, he was a child when he went, or a young man when he went and was sold into slavery, and was a grown man by the time he obtained Pharaoh's favor. And I think that really strikes me, and what strikes me too about Abraham's story is that when God showed him the grains, and says, count the grains of sand on the seashore, or the stars, count those. That's how numerous. Abraham didn't see that come to pass, where there were so many of his children that he couldn't count them. That was not fulfilled in his lifetime.
There was the hope.
And it was the hope, and that Joseph did not instantly see himself go from being a mistreated slave to being, the second in command of all the land. And I think that hope and that perseverance in the goodness of God's favor and what God will bring about for you is, to me, the most beautiful thing. And especially after all that Joseph went through, and his brothers are just so and he's weeping because he's seeing his brothers now. He's weeping, and it was heard throughout his household. And for him to, when they're begging for forgiveness. Oh my gosh, now he's the second in the land. And Joseph says, "Fear not, because what you meant for evil,
Sure.
God meant for good,
For the salvation of many." Yeah,
of many. And it's not just that hopefulness, but that forgiveness of heart. It's just that sheer openness to God, that He will bring it about, and it doesn't matter how long it's going to take. But God was faithful and fulfilled those promises through those men. It's a very inspiring thing.
Right, and having the mindset of expectation. I expect that God is faithful. Sometimes, though, we think that God is faithful, so He's going to do X, Y, Z. He's going to save my marriage. He's going to heal my child. He's going to, and it doesn't necessarily come to pass that way. But we do not know, in the sovereignty of God and the wisdom of God, all of the reasons why He allows the thing that He allows. And then there's always the factor that we live in a fallen world. We live in a place where sin is rampant, and the wages of sin is death. And it is a consequence of sin. And it's a consequence of being mortal, of just living on the earth and going through sickness, going through hard times, because we're not in heaven yet, where there is no sickness, where there are no tears. That time is for a time yet to come. And I think that the older that we get and the more we mature, the more we begin to look forward to that time, realizing that there is so much to life, even more than what we experience now. But rest assured, today, God wants you to know that His faithfulness and His favor are for a lifetime, and they endure, and He does not want us to live a life of hopelessness or helplessness. So if you're listening today and you are thinking, okay, but Wendy, you don't know how difficult my situation is. Well, I'm going to agree with you. I don't know how difficult your situation is. But God does. He knows exactly what you need and when you need it. He's cultivating that element of perseverance in you. He's cultivating the fruit of the Spirit in you. And all of those things will be valuable in the course of your lifetime. I know that sorrow can endure. The Bible doesn't deny it. It can endure for an entire night. For me, it has endured sometimes for years. But that does not mean that joy will come in the morning. That does not mean it's going to last forever, or that there will not come an end to the sorrow. My encouragement to you would be, allow yourself to experience joy. Be willing to be loved. Be willing to receive instruction from the Lord as to what your next step is. Be willing to grow. Be willing to learn. Be willing to embrace. Embrace hope. And if hope does not feel alive in you right now, pray for it. Ask for it. Send me an email. Just go to my website, mattersoftheheartradio.org. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org. Tell me how I can pray for you. I'll join you. Sure, I'll pray for you. What area of life do you need hope in right now? That's what I want to know. The matters that are on your heart matter to God. And that definitely matters to me. And that's what the show is about. I want to talk about the matters that are on your heart. Again, you can reach me at mattersoftheheartradio.org. Is it time for a commercial, or did I pass that?
You have passed that, Miss Wendy. You have passed that, and you've got 3 minutes left in the show.
Okay.
So you round up really well, but I think that there's always a tomorrow. There's a tomorrow for even those who will not see the rest of this day. There is a tomorrow, because there's a tomorrow here.
That's a good point.
There's a tomorrow in eternity. There's always a tomorrow.
That is great.
It's always an opportunity for God to lift you up,
and to pour His love out on you. Sure. I think sometimes we don't realize it, but we can get to a state of bitterness and resentment, even towards our God, because things aren't happening the way that we would hoped or planned. And we can no longer really receive His love, really receive His affirmation, really receive His guidance and direction, because we have that bent. We've taken up an offense. It's imperative that we live a life of forgiveness. And though we don't know that we can trust someone, we can trust God. And though we may not know the plan, we can trust the one who has the plan. He will not forget us, just like a nursing mother cannot forget her child. All the more, He cannot and will not forget us. Our names are etched in the palm of His hand. His love is wide, it is vast, it is pure, it is true, it is sincere, it is holy, it is powerful, it is gracious, it is forgiving, it is mighty, it's never ending. For you and for me, contrary to anything that the enemy would like for you to believe. Exercise your right to hold fast to the promises of God. Believe He is a rewarder, just like He says in Hebrews. He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Those who come to Him must believe that He is. He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Well, you've been listening to me, your host, Wendy Torres, on Matters of the Heart Radio Show. I do hope that you go to my website, mattersoftheheartradio.org. Let me know how I can partner with you in prayer. And would you consider sowing some seed into this fertile ground as I take the gospel, as I am a hope dispenser all around the world, delivering hope to people in Africa, in Pakistan, Australia, the UK. I hear from people all over the world from the different stations that I air on. But I cannot do it alone. I need the financial help and supporting. I need the backing of you, my listener, to any degree that you can. I bless you and I thank you for sowing your most generous seed today.
You've been listening to Matters of the Heart Radio Live. If you enjoyed listening to the show today, we ask that you support it with your gifts. The show could not be made possible without generous contributions from our community of faithful listeners, and in order to make it possible to remain on the air, we need your help. The show is made possible for you and with you, so please consider making a donation today. Please visit the show's website, mattersoftheheartradio.org, and click the donation button at the bottom of the homepage. Learn about partnership opportunities and corporate sponsorship with us to order a signed copy of Miss Wendy's book, Healing Waters. To schedule a counseling session with Ms. Wendy, go to refreshingtimescounselingcenter.com. Visit us on Facebook, and please don't forget to tune in next week with Ms. Wendy on Matters of the Heart Radio Live.